All right, this is the lesson for 1.10. Today we're going to take something called the momentum test, but this is really focusing on evaluating functions. And we're going to show you how to do that in different ways and different presentations, but mainly using the Desmos calculator. So we'll look at what function notation is, how to evaluate it. It says algebraically, but technically it's using Desmos. And then in class, people will take the momentum test, and there is an assignment that goes with this lesson as well. So in middle school, I left this picture in because it's kind of a very basic introduction. But we plug numbers into a formula and then out comes a different number. So it might be something as simple as times by 2. You plug in 5, out comes 10. 5 times 2 is 10, or 2 times 5 is 10. And also, just to get used to some of the vocabulary. So the starting number is the domain or the input, and the number that comes out is the output or the range. So we write function notation like this with the f and the x next to each other, but we read it as f of x. Now, in our last lessons, we've talked about when things are next to each other, it means multiply. That's not the case for this one. It does not mean we're doing f times x. Now, sometimes we also put y equals instead of f of x. And in Unit 2, that's something we're going to be looking at soon. We have something called the slope-intercept form of a line, which is y equals mx plus b. We can also write that as f of x equals mx plus b. So if you can start to think of f of x as like y, that's not necessarily a bad idea at this point. Now, you don't have to just call it f of x. You can use other letters as well. G of x, h of x, and j of x. Now, notice the x is in parentheses here. Normally, this is going to be a number, and then we'll take that number and plug it into the formula. So, for example, if this said g of 10, that means wherever I see x, I'm going to substitute in 10. So on this expression here, 2 times 10 is 20, add 1 is 21. So let's have a look how we would do this on Desmos. Now, sometimes if the questions are easy, like the one I just did, timesing a number by 2 and adding 1, we can probably do that in our head. But if we have something more complicated, like 3x squared minus x plus 4, and we're going to plug in, notice how the number is in parentheses here. This means that x equals 3. If we're going to plug 3 into that formula, that's not so easy to do because there's a few more steps on here. Now, if we just type in the question on the right-hand side of this, you'll notice that it actually draws a graph, which is not what we want for this question. So we have to kind of train Desmos a little bit. So if we put x, it thinks we want a graph. So all we're going to do is we're going to add a little 1 in. Now, I just pressed the regular 1. Notice it did a subscript of 1. To get the squared, you can come down here, and there's a little squared button. And then I can type in the rest of the equation. Notice I also need 1 again here because this is x, and then plus 4. Now, I have now got the equation typed in. It says error right now, but that's only because I haven't clicked this add slider button. And what we can do is we can move this along, or we can just come up to here, which is actually the better way of doing this, and just type whatever number we want. So for this question, we want positive 3. And notice up here, it actually changes the question, changes the answer for us, and it will actually evaluate the expression for us. So there's nothing wrong with using the slider. That's perfectly okay. But it's much easier because sometimes it's a little bit fiddly to get it exactly on 3. You can do that as well. Notice the slider only goes from negative 10 to 10 anyway. So any numbers outside that numbers, you'd need to come and physically type this in anyway. So we type in the equation, but without the f of x equals part. So essentially everything after the equals part. And just a reminder, whatever the expression is, you have to put a 1 next to the letter. Now, we only have to do that for x and y, actually. Any other letter of the alphabet is perfectly okay. It might help you just to put a 1 next to everything just to make sure. So even if it's A, you might just choose to put A1 as well anyway. But you should not see a graph. That's really important, or else it will not evaluate it. And then change the slider to whatever the letter is, whatever the number is in parentheses. So f of 4 just means that x is 4. And then you just look back at your original expression, and Desmos will have worked it out for you. So this one here, it says, given g of x equals 7 minus x squared, find g of negative 2. Now, one of the reasons why we want to do this is a lot of people think they can just type this straight in. So 7 take away negative 2 squared. And they're like, look, I just did it perfectly okay. Now, actually, look, that's actually a wrong answer for this question. So let me type this in. Now, you might notice I did not push the shift, I did not use the keyboard that time. You can also do exponents with shift and 6, and I find that's a little bit easier to do. I did forget to put the little 1 in, and it actually drew the graph for me. So let me put the 1 in there. There we go. So I don't see a graph, so that's good. Click on the slider, And this time I want to set the slider to -2. I could slide it, but it's so much easier just to type in -2. And notice, see, the answer is actually 3 and not 11. So the thing that people often forget to remember is if they are substituting by hand, one of the things you'd have to do is you would have to put parentheses around this -2 here. So it's much easier to type in the variable, and then you can get an answer. The other good thing about doing it this way is if I had a second question, I can quickly change that number and I've got a new answer straight away without having to change the typing of this part here as well. Getting a little more complicated now. So square root. So it tells you on the keyboard where it is. So you can do that. And then I'm going to type in the question, 52 plus 4b. Now notice for this one, it did not draw a picture, and it does, and it's going to allow me just to click this slider right here. And it says -6.75. Now I can't do that with a slider anyway, so I might as well just type it in, and you can see that I got 5. There is nothing wrong if you want to put B1 as well and do the same thing, and hopefully we'll see that same answer again. There we go. Now, there is one other way you can actually do the square root symbol as well. Often I find it easier to type. You can type in SQRT, and it will also draw a square root for you as well. This time, this is absolute value. This is when it takes something that's negative and changes it to a positive. If it's already positive, it will leave it as positive. So down on the keyboard, there you go. You can see the lines around the symbol. So let me click that. And then inside, I want A -4. If you want to put A1, that is perfectly okay. If I click to the side here, you can kind of, that line's not very, is a little faint, but you can see that it is there. Let me click on my slider. And this time I want the number to be -5. And that would give me an answer of -9. Now, a lot of people get confused with the absolute value, thinking it makes anything that's negative positive, but I ended up with something negative. Well, the thing inside the absolute value is positive, sorry, but notice there's a negative at the start of the question. So for that reason, that's why I had a negative answer here as I was working through that question. To do the cube root, this is not so easy to get to. You have to select functions, scroll to the bottom, and then select this option here. And I'll show you how to do that on the next screen here. So to do cube root, let me open up my calculator. I go to functions. I scroll all the way to the bottom, click on this button here, and then you can see it's going to let me type in a little 3 here. And then I can type in the question. Now notice this is an X, so I definitely need a 1 for here. Or look, you can already see it started to draw me a graph. So let me put the 1 in there, type in the squared, +2, and then this time it says F5. So let me change that to 5. And there you can see we have our answer of 3. Now there is actually a way, and I'm trying to remember, I think for cube root, I think you can actually type in CBRT. There you go. If you can remember CBRT, that works really well. They're the only two that we actually use for Algebra 1. As an extension, you can pick any root that you like by typing in nth root. And then you can pick a 4, 5, 6, whatever number you would like. So you could also do that for the 3 as well, which is kind of what we did a second ago. But CBRT, I started to use at the end of last year, and I found that's really quick to do on a keyboard. Now, there are questions to practice. If you get them correct, it will say good job. And I'm going to leave it at this point here. In fact, you can see the answers right here. It says if you didn't get these, you should try again. And that's actually the end for this lesson. This was originally 3.2 last year. That's something I need to change before we use this in class. And actually this year we just evaluated functions algebraically. We didn't do that graphically, but we will do that in a future lesson.